morning and welcome to the Eco-nomics Unscripted podcast. It's day 2 of Sustainability Week, and we're happy to be supported by the Enactus Student Society, which is a student society for student-led entrepreneurs at the University of Glasgow. And today we're very lucky to be joined by Dr. Robert McMaster. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Just to start us off, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your interests?
My name's Robert McMaster. I've been at Glasgow since 2007, so 19 years.
Long
And
time.
yeah, well, basically, so my position is I kind of transcend economics and management. So I'm based in management, and my teaching includes ethics and business, economic crises and depressions, history of economic thought, a bit of health economics, and so forth. Whatever else
Yeah,
is thrown at me.
it's a very wide spectrum. That's really cool. First
Well,
question for the students is probably why is ethics and sustainability so important when students graduate in today's world?
I, I don't think it's actually increased in its importance. I think it's always been important. Perhaps we've lost sight of its importance in the way that we teach business and economics, indeed. If we go back to the classical political economists, they had a view of the economy as a social provisioning process. So basically, it was essentially about meeting needs, how these are managed, how we organize ourselves to meet our needs and our wants. And also, that would include and embrace power relationships. It would embrace care. And I think the subject matter has really narrowed with perhaps, as you alluded to previously, the growth of disciplines, for example. So in economics, at least as I understand it, the economy is just basically seen as a theatre of exchange. So it's how best to satisfy as many wants as possible, and there's this whole notion of scarcity and choice.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't reflect what some classical political economists said about we would get to society would get to a stage of abundance, for example, and growth would stop, or what we now call growth would stop. We get to so-called stationary state. Some viewed it as rather a pessimistic perspective. Others viewed it, such as John Stuart Mill, even John Maynard Keynes, viewed it as issues associated with abundance.
Yeah.
And I would argue that we're there.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really deep perspective on sustainability, and I think that's important too because you, in your own words, you said care and going beyond just ticking a box with sustainability. Why our future leaders, when this becomes a bigger and bigger issue with population growth, they actually really need to care and really be in the game. So that sort of leads me into my next question. Why is it so important for us graduating now to actually care and actually understand this and not just, tick box?
Well, we have the position where I we're we're confronting quite profound climate change. We have unsustainable, I would venture, arrangements in place in terms of climate change. And there is a distributional impact on that as well, in that it disproportionately impacts on the poorest and the poorest countries. I think there is evidence to that effect. We're also in a well, I think it's important to appreciate that uh, well, there are several aspects to this. The first one is that I think the way that we educate students, and I think that that requires more involvement from the students themselves. They have a degree of responsibility about their education. I so in terms of that, for instance, in finance, it's as I understand it fairly narrow. Economics is the same. There may be one or two courses in management that talk about sustainability and social issues. I And perhaps that should be embedded throughout the
Hmm.
curriculum. So, to give you a couple of examples, I know of no courses. Now, that doesn't mean to say that's not the case. This is,
Controversial.
yes, I know of no courses in ethics and business, of course, uh, that really address issues associated with care and harm. And that, I think, uh, is required in terms of enhancing student understanding, indeed our own understanding. And I would argue that I do, well, certainly in ethics and business, I don't do this to a satisfactory degree. I don't spend enough time on it. But I think it's really important because we all have a responsibility. I There is this notion in the harm literature, I where harm has a moral priority. So, in other words, we should really businesses are including ourselves. We should be sensitive to this moral priority of the possibilities of our actions causing others harm. So, of course, harm in many circumstances is unavoidable, but nonetheless, we should be sensitive to those sorts of issues. And what it might be worth considering is there's a perhaps a distinction between doing and allowing harm. Uh, by not taking any action, are we allowing harm, and do we still have a moral responsibility for allowing harm to occur?
Not making a choice is also a choice. So letting harm happen is also a choice, and it's a dangerous choice with how quickly this chaos is escalating. If I could say that. But just to shift a little bit, are there any myths about sustainability in business that you think students should be aware of?
Another excellent question. Perhaps it's the business and sustainability. Even looking at the UN development goals, it still includes economic growth. And of course, it's dressed up as sustainable economic growth. What does that mean? If one looks at the 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 planet overshoot day, I think it's a wonderful way of illustrating how we're depleting the resources of the planet. So when I was a youth, it planet overshoot day was in November of the year. Now it's moved to July, and that's within a relatively short space of time.
They're only 12 months in a year, so
There are only 12 months in a year, I understand.
yeah.
And basically, I think that's a splendid way of framing how we think about things, about the need and importance for sustainability and how it's all our responsibilities. I Now, how I don't pretend to know the answers about how to galvanize business to recognize this when they're driven in a particular way, about shareholder value and so forth. So, it might well be the rise of alternative ways of organizing how we conduct business and exchange in markets, less about shareholder extraction and more about wealth and more about value generation. I With an emphasis on sustainability. So there's a whole literature about how we value things. I and again, I think it's beholden on us as educators as well to at least identify that for students, as part of the curriculum, as it were. And I'm not entirely sure that we currently do this. There are movements in that direction, obviously. I and some of my colleagues do some excellent work in this respect, but we are to some extent constrained by what we teach in terms of QAA, quality assurance, and so forth. So there are those balances that have to be recognised. But I'm hoping optimistic me, I'm hoping we're moving in the right direction in that, in terms of how we frame things for students who I hope are interested.
But if you had, say, a minute with our business school students, what's one step
Oh.
that you would suggest to them so we can all take these steps towards changing the world?
Uh, that's that's a bumper of a question. Don't do as I do. That would be my first. And in terms of this, is to recognise that we all have some degree of responsibility. In terms of how we consume and our actions. So it's a case of also questioning what you're being taught. So to go back to my experience as a teacher, I we're basically wedded to this notion of unlimited wants in society, that there's just this assumption that we all have unlimited wants, but there's very little evidence to substantiate that. Uh, it's one of these sorts of unquestioned truisms, as it were. Uh, I would invite students to really question that.
That's very it's a very nice way to put it, and it sort of just leaves you with more questions, and then you get more confused, and then seek out
I'm
another
certainly very
person. Yeah.
confused.
But that's sort of how you learn and find new things, and I guess that's how you change the world. Thank you very much, Robert. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.